Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's Burning Clay, and I am back with another Digimon TCG video. Now today what we're going to do is we're going to look into BT8, but we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to look at the Armor Digivolving package that comes with BT8, but instead of Veemon, which everybody is concentrating on, I wanted to give my boy Armadillomon a little bit of love as well. So we're going to do an Armor Digivolve Armadillomon deck profile video. Let's get into it. Now first up, we're going to get into our Digitama. In this deck, I'm going to propose that we run 3 copies of Upamon from BT3. Now this has the inherited ability of when attacking once per turn, if you have 3 or fewer security cards, trigger, draw 1. Now we are going to be running a bit of recovery synergy, but I figured it would be good for us to have this ability. That way, if we were below 3 security, we could trigger that draw 1, get a little bit of consistency going with the deck, and just help us make sure that we're pulling the cards that we need to make everything work. We'll finish up our Digitama running 2 copies of Veemon, which is coming from BT8. This has the inherited ability of, while on your turn, while having 3 or more security cards, this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP. Now, like I said, this deck is going to be running a little bit of recovery synergy. Haven't played around with it. Obviously, it's not built. I don't know whether or not you're going to be playing with 3 or more security a ton. So it might be one of those situations where if you wanted to try this deck out, have a little fun with it, you might want to change up the Digitama ratio. It might be beneficial to run more of the Veemon rather than the Upamon, but until anybody actually built this and ran with it, it's hard to tell. But these would be the 2 Digitama that I would work with more than anything, either just to get that DP boost or a little bit of draw consistency, depending on where you're at in security. Now we're going to get into our level 3s, and the first one we're going to be looking at is 2 copies of Patamon from BT8. Now this blue Patamon can digivolve on top of blue or yellow, so we would be able to jump on top of our Digitama with that without any issues, and it also has the inherited ability of at the end of your turn, you may DNA Digivolve this Digimon and one of your other Digimon in play into a Digimon in your hand by paying its DNA Digivolve cost. So this is just a way for us to kind of be able to get into it. If you've been looking around, you can tell that we do have a DNA Digivolve card in this deck. So this is just a way for us to kind of get into it a little easier and roll with it that way. We're only running 2 copies of it. Most of our level 3s will be our boy Armadillomon, which we'll get into in just a second. Speaking of Armadillomon, 4 copies of the BT1 blue version of Armadillomon will be the next card that we look at. Now, this one cannot digivolve on top of yellow like our Patamon can, but it's only a 2 cost to play, so it's not really going to affect us too much. We're running 4 of these. It is just another chance for us to get into our Army Digivolutions and roll with it that way. No inheritables, nothing like that. Just a cheap option for us to get on the field. Next, we're going to be looking at 4 copies of the BT3 yellow version of Armadillomon. 0 cost to digivolve on top of our Digitama, 3 cost to play, vanilla, not really much to it, just another way for us to get into our armored options. Last but not least, we are going to be running 4 more copies of Armadillomon, this time the BT8 version. Now this one is a 3 cost to play, and then free to digivolve on top of our Digitama, but it does have an on-play ability to reveal the top 4 cards of your deck and add 1 2-colored yellow card among them to your hand. Replace the rest of the cards at the bottom of your deck in any order. And as we'll get into in just a second, you will see that we do have a number of 2-colored cards with yellow in them coming up. So this is just a way for us to get those cards in our hands to help us with our digivolving and getting up into levels to where we can really start making a few plays. So now let's get into our level 4s, and the first one that we're going to look at is 4 copies of Tamer. Now this has the ability, much like you see with the Veemon Armor Digivolving, to digivolve on top of your Armadillomon for a cost of 2. Now it does have that same Armor Purge ability that you've seen come with the Veemon deck that allows you to discard the top card of that Digimon to prevent the overall deletion. So you could then save the Armadillomon or potentially the Patamon that would be underneath to then make more plays in the future. It also has the when Digivolving ability to trash the bottom Digivolution card of one of your opponent's Digimon, and then one of your opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution cards gets minus 3000 DP for the turn. So hopefully we're able to get into this card pretty early in the game. Maybe our opponent has just brought out a level 3 or hard play to level 3. We can trash a Digivolution card from one of our opponent's Digimon, and then hopefully that level 3 that's out on the field is weak enough to where the minus 3000 DP would delete it overall, and then we kind of clear one of our opponent's Digimon off the board. Next, we're going to be running 4 copies of Digimon. Now, this is another armor Digimon that allows us to armor Digivolve on top of an Armadillomon for just a 2 cost. Now, this one also has the armor purge ability, much like the Tamer, and this one has the native ability of when attacking one of your opponent's suspended Digimon gets minus 3000 DP for the turn. So this could be a possible chance for us to attack our opponent's Digimon directly. Maybe they have a lower level Digimon again, that minus 3000 can get us below the 5000 threshold. We attack them, we survive, we clear one of our opponent's options off the board, and just be able to make plays after that. Now, unlike the Veemon line, we only were able to get 2 armored Digivolving options. So we're going to finish out our level 4s with 4 copies of Digimon from BT8. This one can Digivolve on top of blue or yellow for a 3 cost. So regardless of whether it's our Armadillomon or Patamon, we will be able to get into Digimon with no issues. Now, it has the native ability of on your turn when this Digimon would Digivolve, if you have 3 or fewer security cards, you can get recovery +1. So this is again what I was talking about, where we're going to play a little bit around with security. I wouldn't call it security control, but we will be playing around with the recovery aspect. So depending on where we're at, this is what I was talking about with our Digitama on which one might be better. Now, it also has an inheritable ability of when attacking, if you have 3 or more security cards, you can return one of your opponent's level 3 Digimon to its owner's hand. So hopefully, as you'll see, we're able to continue to recover, keep our security up at the 3 or more, and then we could potentially be forcing our opponent to either Digivolve on top of Digimon that they don't want to, bringing it back to our turn, or forcing them to keep a Digimon in the nursery area until it is a level 4 or higher before being able to bring it out. Now we're going to move on to our level 5s, and we are going to be running 4 copies of Magna Digimon. This has the native ability of when attacking, if you have 3 or more security cards, this Digimon gets plus 4000 DP until the end of your opponent's next turn. So not only does it allow you to go into 11,000 on your turn, but then it is safe from your opponent unless they have a super strong Digimon on their side as well, because it gets to stay at 11,000 DP till their turn is over. Now, it also has the inherited ability of on your turn once per turn, when a card is added to your security stack, you can gain a memory. So we've already seen with the Digimon that when you Digivolve, if you have the 3 or less, you can add 1 card to your security stack. So now if we have Digimon underneath and we're up in one of our megas, then we could potentially add a memory to us, and then just kind of allowing us a little more leeway as far as other plays that we might want to make while it's our turn. Now we're going to round out our level 5s with 4 copies of Shakyumon. Now, this is the DNA Digivolving Digimon that our Patamon could potentially help us out with that I mentioned earlier. So to DNA Digivolve, you can do it for a cost of 0 as long as you have a yellow level 4 and a blue level 4, and then you can put all of those cards along with their Digivolution sources underneath Shakyumon and unsuspend this Digimon once you Digivolve. Then it has the when Digivolving ability to, if you have 5 or fewer security cards, you can recover 1 to the top of your security. Then, if you DNA Digivolved, you return one of your opponent's Digimon whose level is less than or equal to the number of cards in your security stack to its owner's hand. So, depending on where you're at, if you are able to get into Shikuyamon super early and your opponent hasn't attacked your security, you still get that recovery +1, and then you're able to take any Digimon at that point. It could be a level 6 if they were able to get to it super quick, and return it back to the owner's hand, trashing all the Digivolution sources. So I really like what this card does. Plus, with the security recovery, if you have your Magna Angemon on the field at all, you could potentially be looking at memory again, and it's just another way for us to kind of play around with that. Now, it also has the inherited ability of when attacking one of your opponent's Digimon, gets negative or minus 3000 DP for their turn. So it's just a way for you to be able to take your opponent, weaken them down while you're attacking, kind of give you a little bit of momentum and a little bit of leeway to who you could potentially be attacking if you wanted to, say, go after one of your opponent's Digimon rather than going after security card. Now we're going to round out our Digimon with our only Mega that we're running, and that will be 4 copies of Magna German from EX1. Now, this has the when Digivolving ability that you can actually trash the top card of your security stack to unsuspend this Digimon. So depending on where you're at, you could potentially play around a little bit with some of the security, get a little shenanigans going, and then still make a recovery. So let's just say that when you're Digivolving, you're sitting at 4 security. So you Digivolve, you trash one of your cards, now suddenly you're at 3. You're on top of your Upamon, or in this case, you could even be on top of your Freemon. Regardless, you're sitting at 3 security, so either you get a draw 1, or you get 1000 DP for when you attack. Then when you attack, you can trigger Magna German's ability of when attacking once per turn. If you have 3 or fewer security cards, recovery +1. Then depending on having a Magna Angemon on the field, you're looking at potential memory increase. And that's not the only way that we could potentially be looking at a memory increase, which we'll get into in just a second. Now that we are done with our Digimon, let's take a look at our option cards. And we're actually going to be running 3 copies of Holy Wave. Now this has the main ability to trigger security or recovery +1. Obviously, not only does that help with our security increasing and prolonging our game, but depending on what we have on the field, we could potentially be looking at gaining some memory, which never hurts. If this card's hitting security, then you just get to recover your security +1 for free, which is fantastic. Next, we're going to be looking at 1 copy of Reinforcing Memory Boost. This is the one from BT6 that allows us as the main ability to reveal 2 cards from the top of our deck. We can place one of them face down to the top of our security, and then we add the other to our hand. Then we get to place it in the battle area to where we can later on use its main delay effect of gaining 3 memory. Now this is a powerful card all on its own because unlike the other memory boost cards that we've seen, it actually allows us to gain 3 memory instead of 2. Plus you have the extra benefit of being able to increase your security. Not only that, we're already talking with a few memory shenanigans with increasing our security, so we could potentially be reducing the cost of this 6 down to 5, 4, or even less. Then later on you get that gain 3 memory, which is only going to help us out with making some plays. Finally, we're going to end our option cards with 2 copies of Weiner's Breath. Now this is basically Yellow's Gaia Force. It allows us to delete one of our opponents, well, not necessarily delete, but we can give one of our opponent's Digimon minus 15k for DP for the turn, which more often than not is going to allow us to delete them. Whether it's straight delete from the DP reduction, or if it allows us to get low enough to then attack them, which with an 8 cost probably is not going to happen, but you never know what kind of situation that you could find yourself in. But it's always a nice card to have in, especially if they hit it in security, and then it's free to play, and you could potentially be eliminating a very powerful threat from your opponent's side. Let's wrap this up by getting into our tamers, and the first tamer that we're going to be looking at is 3 copies of Cody from BT8. Now, at the start of our main phase, if we have Cody on the field, if we have a yellow Digimon in play, we get to gain 1 memory. So that right there is just going to help us out. Now, on our turn, if one of our Digimon with 2 or more colors attacks, which we have plenty of them to choose from, we could suspend this tamer and give one of our opponent's Digimon minus 2000 DP for the turn. So again, we could look at a little DP reduction, help us with eliminating some threats from our opponent's side before they really become major threats later on. Now we're going to wrap up this deck with 3 copies of Kari from BT8. Now this one's going to be our memory setter to make sure that we always start at 3, but we also have the ability of on our turn, when a card is added to our security stack, you can suspend this tamer to gain 1 memory. Now, just like Cody and most other tamers, if it's hit in security, we can play it without paying its memory cost. But this, along with our Armadillomon, is going to allow us to just kind of gain a few additional memory if we're able to get these recoveries off for our security and just help us make additional plays as we go on to try to keep control of the game. Like I said, I wouldn't really call it security control as much as just a yellow control, as we're more just trying to keep it on our turn, build our side up, and really prevent our opponent from being able to really do much of anything rather than just consistently taking and adding to security. But, I mean, in the end, it's yellow, it's security control more than likely, if you want to say so. I'm not going to stop you. So that's it. That's our Digimon deck profile for Armored Digivolving Armadillomon. That's a mouthful. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I don't expect this deck to actually be anything as far as competitive goes, but I would, I just wanted to give somebody else a little bit of love. Everybody's focusing on Veemon. Armadillomon does have a few options that you can go on to. Sadly, I don't think Hawkmon is really viable as far as the Armored Digimon goes. It doesn't really have the synergy that even this Armadillomon deck would have, in my opinion. But it was a fun deck to put together. You never know. Maybe I'll actually try to build it and then maybe take it to a locals one night and see how it does against some of the more popular decks. I do like to run the less traveled decks, the rogue decks, if you will. So I could see myself building this deck and having a little bit of fun on the side. But if you enjoyed this video, which I hope you did, make sure to hit the like button. Get down in the comment section below. Tell me what you think of this deck, if there's anything that you would change with it, or if you think that it was just a waste of time. But until then, we'll catch you in the next video. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's Burning Clay, and I am back with another Digimon teeth. Another Mon?